part of being an effective leader, as my mentors have helped me understand, is owning your misses and also being compassionate on the hardest of decisions. If you decide to move forward with growth, then you need to be there in the time for the wind down. And you need to be the person to sit there and own it fully.
This is the Staying Power Podcast, a show that explores the challenges business owners face as they grow. I'm Brandon Hall.
And I'm Thomas Castelli.
And together, we ask the tough questions to show you that running a business is not for the faint of heart. But if you have staying power, you'll overcome your challenges and achieve lasting success.
Hey everybody, we're joined here today with Spencer Hilligos, an active syndicator, real estate investor, and executive leader for two real estate businesses. His own company, Madison Investing, has co-sponsored deals totaling more than 4,000 units and more than $500 million in capital. He's also a former technology leader with 13 years of experience of building high-performing teams across 5 different companies in Silicon Valley, 3 of them being software unicorns valued at over $1 billion.
The best part of this interview, in my opinion, was the statement, the small phrase that he put around, if you are running a business, especially if you have an equity stake, or if you're the boss of anybody, it's fine to celebrate the upswings and to celebrate the wins. But when things start going south, you need to be there and you need to step up for your team. That's where leaders are made. And that was a really good part of the conversation that you guys should pay attention to today.
And absolutely. He also talked about sacrifice and sacrifice on what it takes to get your business going while you're working in a full-time job. And he talked about how he had to go to bed at 9 p.m. and wake up every day at, I think it was 5 a.m. or 4. It might even have been 4 a.m., which is just...
Yeah, it was early.
Yeah, it's just outlandish. But either way, it just talks about the sacrifices it takes to get your business off the ground, which is what staying power is all about. So there's a lot more we discussed in this interview, but we're not going to go ahead and deliberate on anymore. We're going to go ahead and just jump right in and let you hear for yourself. Spencer, thanks for taking the time to come on the show today. Can you give our listeners a little information on your background?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on, guys. It's really an honor to be here and kind of talk about some learnings and some challenges throughout the entrepreneurship journey, of which there are many. So, I am currently in the real estate business, but that is not necessarily what I've been doing for the last 13 years. So I am based out here in the Bay Area, California. I got into the local business, as you call it out here, which is technology. So in 13 years, across 5 different software companies, I have been building and leading operations and sales groups. Some of these are like very known big companies, and the rest of them are all small startups that are like unicorns or valued at over $1 billion. So that's been my work and my passion for 13 years is like going in, hiring hundreds of people and growing those teams and helping coach up and build professionals and processes along the way. Right. Beyond that, though, my most recent company, before I quit 4 months ago, so I actually quit my W-2 career 4 months ago, I was at a place called Lending Home, which is the biggest fix and flip lender in the country and doing, most recently 600 fix and flip transactions per month. And so super proud of that work. But yeah, these days now, full-time real estate investor, invest passively ourselves. And when I say we, I mean Jennifer Morimoto, who's my wife. And my business partner. And we also are a co-sponsor. So we help get other people involved and educate them and invest alongside us into commercial real estate as well so they can build passive income.
Nice. And what made you decide to transition out of a W-2 career and start your own company, Madison Investing?
Yeah, this is, going to take you way back for a very brief moment. I first had exposure to real estate way earlier than most people typically would expect to hear. My first exposure to real estate was at the age of 6. So my dad, he became one of the top residential real estate brokers in the country back in the 90s. And so I watched him kind of ramp up and ascend to these amazing elite levels while, starting at very humble beginnings. And so flash forward a bunch of years, as a teenager, he was making me work open houses and multi-million-dollar mansions because I grew up in the peninsula, got exposure to what that was like. I was like shaking hands with some local football players and not even knowing who they were at the time. Of course, in hindsight, I was pretty silly. I was just a teenager that wanted to get the heck out of there. So long story short, I got these exposures to real estate, but I really, really didn't want anything to do with it, frankly. I really wanted to get out of there because I wanted to hang out with my friends. So I ran screaming from real estate, ran into tech, but I still held on to a couple of things from that experience. And just to keep it brief, my dad's business crumbled because of some really hard stuff. Years later, the whole thing crumbled because I lost my younger brother to pediatric cancer that triggered a divorce, because that usually happens. And then our whole financial world just shrunk. So I carried a lot of learnings from that experience, man. It was really something. I learned, how do I better protect my family now that I have my own kids? I have 2 young boys, 2 and 5 years old, and a family that I have to take care of. And I think about those principles that I learned when I watched my dad's active income go from these high flying, huge numbers from transactions to basically zero for a period of time before he built back up and found success again. I look at that, compare that to my track record in my W-2 career, like the vast majority of people out there that have worked in companies. And I think, like, man, if we stop working, the income stops flowing. And that's not acceptable if I'm trying to make sure that my family is safe. Like, what happens if I get hit by a bus? What happens if I come down with something that is a terminal disease? What happens if I become incapable of performing the work that generates our income for our family? So all of those things really led me to realizing I need like an exit strategy from this corporate world so that we can start getting some more stability financially. So that's where we started investing passively. And so that happened about 4 years ago. We started just investing the way that most real estate investors do. We got too scared to go out of state. The Bay Area is extraordinarily expensive, but we still started there. We drove around on weekends with our infant child in the car and looked for a duplex to buy. We finally bought one and paid like $430,000 for it. In hindsight, I would not have done that if I knew then what I know now. But it cash flows $250 a month, so there you go. At least it's positive. But we later realized we could deploy our capital in smarter, better ways and get income from out of state, better cash flowing deals. And we did all that stuff, built up a pipeline of income, a bunch of them, added some income streams. And eventually it just became kind of my full-time passion and my full-time job. And I really wish I had started it 13 years earlier, because it would mean I could have retired, quote unquote, from my corporate career way earlier if I had done that.
So you said that it's incredible backstory, by the way. And you had exposure to business and real estate at a very young age. And you said that with watching your dad's business collapse or the income stop, you referenced that you built principles off of that. What are some of those principles, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, well, thanks for catching that point. It's the 2 principles that I've really grasped onto, and I'm so nerdy about this, guys, that I've actually put this down on paper, and it's part of my note-taking, kind of just some of the mantras that I reaffirm. And it's just the notion of financial offense and financial defense. And it's a funny framing for a guy who's like the least sports guy ever, by the way, but I'll just say financial offense, meaning there's so many ways that we can go out as entrepreneurs and just innovate and say, how can I go get that increased income? How can I go and figure out, maybe I offer a product or build something? How can I go out and grow my money with money, right? And I think I didn't even have that part of my brain turned on, even as a working professional, up until about 4 or 5 years ago. I thought financial offense means what most people think it to mean, which is get promoted at my job if I work really hard and I get lucky, or I have a boss that recognizes my work, which is really infrequent, right? And so even then, financial offense would still only mean a 5% increase in W-2 income, which is heavily taxed. So that was my previous playbook on financial offense, and it's wrong. And it took me a long time to realize, wait a sec, that anything beyond 40 hours a week that I'm putting into this career. And by the way, I'm not one of those folks that says, screw the working world and screw the corporate world. I really loved and cherished my time there. I'm not the guy that says, quit at all costs and screw the corporate world. I really believe that people should go through a W-2 career if they haven't done one before, at least in a limited sprint. For that reason, you get skills, you get all this other stuff. But there's other ways to play offense, much better ways to play offense. And that every hour spent at a full-time job beyond 40 hours a week is something that is not your highest leverage use of time to go develop more dollars. That is what I have come to believe. And that's the financial offense side. The financial defense side, it's all about the world that I really believe that you guys could run circles around me in terms of knowledge base because of your professions, right? And which is to put it in Robert Kiyosaki's terms, it's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. I just butchered that phrase, but you guys get the point. I came to realize, like after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, like so many other people do, oh wait, my tax burden is controllable. It's based on our choices, and it's based on how we generate our incomes. And so I really took a hard look at that. And I mean, I spent some of my time in the corporate world, not just as an operations leader, building big teams of, operations, customer support teams, but also in sales and in sales leadership roles. And that's some of the hardest hit taxes, heavily taxed bonus structures that you can possibly find in the United States. So I've paid so much in taxes already in my life. The moment I realized I could change this number, like I can actually impact this number, it really opened my eyes. And so, financial defense also includes things like, as nerdy as this might sound, like different types of insurance, make sure people are covered in the event of something massive happening in your life. Are you investing across asset classes? Like we do invest in things like gold and silver, just different ways to think. I could probably nerd out a lot further on the different ways that we play that out. But financial offense and financial defense is the way that I couch everything in terms of the levers that we pull.
So financial offense, in your mind, financial offense is having control, being able to heavily influence your income streams with your time. And what you're saying is that you can do that with your W-2 job, but you can't heavily influence it, because at the end of the day, you're still subject to whatever the ultimate business, they have to move resources around, and you could absolutely crush it. And you might get a 10% raise versus a 5% raise. But if you had invested that same amount of time into your own venture, you could have potentially seen a lot better of a return. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's really well said. Yes.
Okay. And then financial defense is just keeping more of what you make. So making sure that you're well optimized from a tax perspective, making sure that you're legally protected so that nobody can come and sue you, that type of thing. So I love it. Financial offense, financial defense. Those are two really good principles. And I also like that you kind of said, you're not anti-W-2. I do think that businesses are risky. And when people jump into business without having a lot of good experience, or if they jump into business without necessarily having an idea of how they can get from point A to point B, you see a lot of floundering. So I think financial offense could also potentially be risky, but I think to your point, nobody even thinks about financial offense as it's just so siloed into the W-2, because that's what we've been taught growing up for the most part. And that's what we're taught in school. And it's just constantly banged into our head. But let's circle back to Madison Investing. So how big is your team today?
We run lean. We only have Jennifer and I as the co-founders, and then we use a series of just third-party, consultants and vendors that help us out in a couple specific ways. We have hired, as an example, accountancy. First things we did was we worked on accountancy and bookkeeping. So we have partners that help us on those two fronts. We also have hired, opportunistically, we've hired like a marketing firm to help us a while back with some content, for content marketing and stuff. And we decided to step away from that, various vendors for technology and software, for investor database and all that good stuff. But long story short is it's really just us. And we deliberately decided to try to hold off on hiring anyone full-time, like a badged employee, until absolutely necessary. And right now, in the middle of COVID-19 crisis time, as we approach the peak in so many hard hit areas around this, I'm more thankful now than ever that we have stayed lean.
Mm-hmm. So what made you hire the marketing firm, and what made you decide to end that relationship?
Yeah, good question. So we had this relationship with someone who, ironically, when I was at a previous software company, and I've worked at 3 different software companies that built software specifically for the back office and small businesses, just to give some context for everybody. And they're all particularly within payroll, HR, accountancy, taxes, all those different companies. We had a client that I used to work with, my teams would work with and support their firm. He then left and became a marketing professional, marketing content. And he reached out to us and said, hey, we think that we're really good at writing in terms of financial literature and copy, and we would love to help you do some blogs, and you guys would still be involved in the idea generation and stuff. So we gave it a try. And he did a really, what frankly, I think a really solid job. The challenge is it's a super niche space. It's a tall order to have someone who's not living and breathing commercial real estate transactions and syndications and capital raises and investment and all this stuff. If they're not living and breathing it every day, I don't expect them to overnight ramp up and be able to write eloquently in that space. So long story short, we were happy with the quality, but the expectation of them doing it as well and as tailored as I could personally write it was just too tough. So it ended up being also, by the way, a big learning for us. And this is the biggest learning, I would say. There's certain things you can outsource, and it makes total sense to do it because you will do it as the founder or the driver of the business equally well, right? Like if you will personally perform something equally well to something that you would outsource, then cool, totally fair game to outsource. But if there's something as important as like a first introduction piece of content that a new prospect that your business is considering, like a brand new prospect might read that blog, and if it was written just a little bit better because you wrote it personally, I would want to write that piece of content any day of the week. Like what else will you be spending? Like I'm sitting there going, what else could I be spending my time on that is more valuable than that, right? And so that was ultimately what drove the decision. Not to get too soapboxy, it was like this falls into the category of what is the highest and best use of my personal time. So we opted to turn off the content generation done by other people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that we here at the Real Estate CPA on that side of the business, we've seen that type of issues too, where it's kind of hard to outsource content generation in a very niche space where you really have to be, very technical and very precise in what you're writing. And when you're trying to outsource it and you're not outsourcing it to somebody who understands the space, it becomes very difficult. So I completely understand why you decided to not outsource that or take it back. I think from the conversation we were having before we started recording, you originally started off with a larger team and then decided to go lean. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So we actually, what I was referencing was back in my startup career. So when I was in the W-2 world, I went through a really, really challenging particular run, if you want to call it a run, at a startup. Because, most of the time, just to give context for folks, a lot of these early stage startup companies, no matter if it's in kind of the back office world with accountancy payroll, whether it's any other kind of startup, early on, you're going through this rapid growth period if you're just trying to scale and you're adding tons of headcount because you have to, right? Your customers are exploding. You have so many new people that are referring others. If it's going well, you need more people. And so I was in charge at this one startup, this is just a few years ago, of customer success and the sales groups. And we were like quadrupling the number of customers we had to serve at the time. And it was within a condensed 8-month period of time, we were tripling our customer base. And I was the guy in charge of putting together that hiring plan and then hiring all those people. And it was the hardest year and a half I've ever had professionally, guys. It was the most work I've ever done. It strained my marriage at the time and all this other stuff. And I'll tie it back to where we're at with Madison Investing and why we're not hiring right now. We weren't hiring before COVID. But I put together the hiring plan. I felt really good about the financial assumptions. I felt really good about the operational assumptions at this company. And we executed and we hired tons of folks and I was super proud of it. And we were humming along. And then around month 9 or month 10 on that 8-month plan, we hit a point where, the growth stalled out a little bit. And as a result, we were hiring ahead meaning a little bit ahead of when the business actually needs it. And that could be really helpful and effective if you're confident that the business growth will match what you put in place with the people and all these real human beings that you made job offers to. And it got really excited about the culture in a company that you probably framed and sold them on. And I was in a room maybe about month 11, month 12, and I had to sit there and let go of a lot of those people. And it was my responsibility, right? It was my responsibility to make those really tough calls. And it wasn't the first time that I had to let people go. Unfortunately, when you're in a leadership job early on, like I was thrust into senior leadership at the ripe age of 26 many years ago. And, that was trial by fire. But this was like, cool, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for years now. I'm going to get this right. You still make mistakes. And the mistake I made at that one company was overhiring. And then you're sitting in a room, literally having a person across the table from you crying because they will not have an income to be able to support their family. And you're the person that has to live with that. So as a person who's been through those types of experiences, that's the type of gravity of decision-making that I think is really important for entrepreneurs and people that are hiring their first employees. And if they've never been in that hiring manager seat and like the CEO or the co-founder seat before, you got to think it all the way through, like think it all the way through before you add that head count. Certainly before someone else decides to put their resignation in a career that is otherwise stable and going well. Like, is this sound? Like, do you really feel good about adding that head count? Because I know a lot of firms that were out there literally 3 or 4 months ago adding head count aggressively. And I'd be curious what their plan is now.
So what were some of those assumptions that you made that turned out not to be true? Or was it just simply the growth stalled out and the hiring ahead became the problem?
I think two things. The first one was when you have limited historicals, right? Like really established businesses, like an example would be my first big company was actually Intuit, a company you guys know quite well. They do QuickBooks, TurboTax, and all the rest. I had a wonderful experience at Intuit. And I bring this up because they've been around like over 20 years. So when a company of that pedigree and that track record wants to go make financial assumptions about how many people to hire for the next 12 to 24 months, they can go and pull on thousands of pieces of data for how many purchases that people are making of their products, for how many phone calls that they have to make into the QuickBooks support line. So, all these things. So they can make really, really hyper accurate forecasts of how many people they're going to need. In a really young business, there's really not that many historicals. You've got limited months. You don't have that many customers usually. And so you have some. So you just don't have many data puts of like, okay, customers going in and transacting through this system that is your business, whatever service and product that you might provide. So all you have are the data available. And the data available showed, wow, we're going to keep growing at this rate. That rate was not that rate. That rate, this is like the most unscientific thing. For people not doing visuals and you're just on the podcast, I'll stop using my hand visuals. Basically, you have the high case, like the really strong growth rate case, but what happens if that doesn't get hit? And this is the first error that I made. It wasn't the highest case. It was the next level down business case. It was just healthy growth. It wasn't extreme healthy growth, right? So that was number one. I think the second one was there's ways for people to work really efficiently and just do work well. Do work better. And this is a true comment on working smarter, not harder. The productivity per person is something that is controllable to a degree. And so you can dial that in over time. And I made some poor assumptions at that moment about how much each person should be contributing or like how much is their scope of responsibility in the business, because you've got to make tough decisions about in shrinking times and in times when growth is not hitting. You have to be honest and say, how can each person do more for the business to survive?
Do you mind sharing roughly how many people you had to fire as a result of this?
I think it was somewhere between 12 and 15.
And what do those conversations look like? Let's dive into that a little bit. Most people listening to this podcast are like small to mid-sized businesses. I don't know that they've had to fire 15 people in a very short amount of time. So what do those conversations look like? And does it ever get easier?
Yeah. Oh, man. It absolutely never gets easier. I have done it more times than I care to admit, probably on this podcast, because that's just the nature of being a sales leader and an operational leader for 13 years. And there's a way to be a leader compassionately amidst all this, guys. Part of being an effective leader, as my mentors have helped me understand, is owning your misses and also being compassionate on the hardest of decisions. So I want to give this context to people that are out there first, because before they think I'm a cold, heartless bastard, which is, if you decide to move forward with growth, then you need to be there in the time for the wind down. And you need to be the person that sits there and own it fully. You can't be the person that sits there and absolves the rest of like the market forces as the reason, with a huge caveat of this COVID thing is not included in that comment. This is a unique, really scary moment, this black swan moment. So I just bring that up because when you're sitting in that room and I have to say to a person, this is going to be your last day. And, here's the paperwork and all that stuff. I still shake. It's always uncomfortable. It's always hard, even if it's fully justified in the business and there's not even a surprise. Like if it's been a long drawn out process, whatever that might be, it's hard. It's just incredibly hard. And all you can do is be really, really compassionate and muster up every ounce of empathy that you have and just be honest with people and communicate to the best of your ability.
I absolutely love that, Spencer. I literally got chills when you said that. If you want growth, You have to be there when that growth stalls, and you've got to really step into the leadership shoes. It is so easy to be a leader when you are in the growth phase. It is easy. I know it is because I've experienced it. That's the simple stuff, man. That's the easy stuff. But when it starts going down, when you start getting real challenges thrown at you and you've got to start making head count decisions, and now you're affecting other people's lives in a negative manner, that's the hard stuff. That's really hard. I have a business coach that said, I've had to let people go as well, and it never gets easier. And I had a business coach that told me the day that it does get easy, you need to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself who you've become.
Yes.
Because it should never get easy. If you have any ounce of a solid moral compass, firing people should never be easy. You're negatively impacting their lives. But how do you fire somebody? How do you have that conversation? What does it look like? Are you saying, I'm so sorry that this happened? Is this a performance thing? Like, how do you actually work through that with somebody? Do you offer any sort of support for them, especially if it is due to we way overestimated how much we actually need here?
Great question, man. And if we're going down this route, I'll just say that I think it's probably one of the most undercoached topics, because who wants to talk about that, right? Who wants to go out of their way to talk about that? But I got to tell you, that's why so many people crave assistance. There are thousands of W-2 first-time managers in this world right now who are going into discussions this month, or particularly now more than ever, and they're having to have these conversations with people. And I almost guarantee that they haven't been fully trained on how to do this. They haven't been coached on how to do this. They don't have a working example of sitting in a room with a person who has done it many times to observe what it's like to have a pro do it with them, right? And so really, I think first and foremost, step one, this is how nerdy I'm going to get. I'm just going to give a step-by-step process that I go through in my own mind and habits, which is get right with the sequence of events. So what is the actual sequence of events? And I literally even write that down with bullets on a one-pager, because you need to make sure that this is the right decision, right? And that just means what's the business reasoning listed out rationally, dates, events, feedback, all those things. Step two is get right with the message. Here, I'm pointing to my head. Get right with the message, because there's nothing, no matter what word choices you make in that moment, everything will hinge in that moment on how you deliver it. And not everything, the decision will remain the same, but the way that the person feels respected and treated will come down to how you deliver that message. It's not going to come down to the word choice. The moment that they know what that message is, they are not going to listen that much to you. I'm sorry. It's like the moment that they realize what they're in there to talk to you about, and they see how you're presenting yourself physically, literally down to the way you're conducting yourself. If you're sweating and shaking and acting like this is something you're really uncomfortable with, it's not going to go well. And if you're in there sitting, calmly, confidently, owning the decision, knowing that it's yours, knowing that it's something that is the correct thing to do, hard thing to do, right thing to do, then that will go much more as smoothly as you can in that awful moment. So that's got to be more of the how, without getting too much into verbiage and flow and all the rest.
No, that's great stuff. And it really is tough to have those conversations. And I just want to point out for everybody who's listening to this, I've seen the other side of this, and not as the employee, but I used to be a recruiter for a while, and I'd have people come to my office. I'd be meeting with them, grown men. I'm talking about people in their 40s, 50s with families, break down and cry because they've been let go, laid off, whatever, for whatever reason. And they're worried about their families or about how they're going to be able to pay for their child's schooling, whatever the case is. It has real impacts. So, as a leader, you really need to take hiring seriously. And I think what you said before, Spencer, was excellent. You're taking somebody sometimes out of a perfectly good position, out of a perfectly good career, potentially with another company, another firm, whatever the case is. Now you're bringing them into your team. You really have to be very, very careful that that person's going to be able to stay and succeed with your team, because now you're damaging not only potentially their career, but their livelihood and their family's livelihood. So I really like how you put an emphasis on how big of a weight hiring is. And it is a huge thing. So definitely agree and resonate with a lot of the points there you made. But if we were just to shift gears for a little bit, Now, I know you've started up Madison Capital over the last 4 months or so, but have you had any challenges, any major challenges you had when starting this business, when creating this business that made you say, you know what, I'm done, I'm out, I want to quit, I want to call it quits? And if you had any of those challenges, how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So Madison Investing, we started actually about 3.5, almost 4 years ago. And we were building it just on nights and weekends outside my very demanding leadership career in technology, which was a hell of a task. But just 4 months ago, we got to a stable enough position where I could go full time, and I left behind my W-2 career. So now it's much more manageable outside the context of COVID-19, of course, and childcare issues and all that stuff. But when it comes to challenges, the first challenge I would say, which so many folks that are out there who want to do a business of their own and break out of a W-2 track, if you're in that spot, it's so hard to know, frankly, the time management. The time management, everyone likes to kind of dance around this, I have found, and say like, oh, it's just time management. It's not that hard. It is the thing. It's the thing. Focus and time management is like the reason why people don't go do things outside their day job and start a side hustle that eventually becomes their full hustle, and then quit their career and go and do something that is truly like their dream. And I became rather nerdy and obsessed with that when I couldn't find the availability mentally, and I couldn't find the physical energy throughout the day. I couldn't find it at night. I couldn't find the drive to wake up in the morning and work on my own business before I went into my very demanding business at my day job. And so that was the first challenge, guys. It was like, I know that I want to go and be a full-time real estate investor. As a caveat, I was in a unique position walking into one of the hottest like tech lenders in the country that was lending homes. So I was thinking and breathing real estate investing for single family flips all day. But even then, and I still had commitments that were totally unrelated to our own business that I had to deal with. So what did I do? I just sucked it up, and I realized the only way I was going to get anything done productively at a reasonable speed for my own company was I'm going to have to set my alarm for 4 a.m. I'm not going to wake up at the 5:30 or 5, just to be really specific with people. Like, we had 2 young kids at the time. One was an infant, and they've grown up and are still a handful, but it was particularly challenging then. So I had to get up before everyone else got up and get all the work done that I wanted to get done right then, and then still do some at night, and try to pack in some other work on lunch breaks and breaks throughout the day that I had for my day job. So time management, man, whenever people say they can't do it for their day job, it's typically just because their why is not strong enough, I have found. I did also turn down 3 separate promotions during that course of time. I think that's worth mentioning for the people that have W-2 careers that are trying to start their own thing. If you're in a unique position of doing well and your boss comes to you and says, hey, we'd love to give you this increase in comp, maybe it's 10, 20, 30%, heavily taxed W-2 income, by the way. And what they don't tell you is that, hey, along with this awesome new job and prestige and big title and more responsibility and 60 hours a week instead of 40, they kind of slip in. You're going to spend a lot more time doing things like dinners at night for glad handing. If you're an executive at a company, you got to do a bunch of dog and pony shows, as they call them. So you got to think about that stuff. You got to think about how do you keep your time like ruthlessly protected and then be able to go and focus on your own business. So, and I know some folks out there don't have a W-2 career and they're just running their own business. So that may not apply to them, but I'll say beyond that, the second challenge that we've probably dealt with would say focus strategically. And what I mean by focus strategically is this. When you start a business, you're going to go out and have this insecurity that so many people do of comparison. And you're going to go out and say, oh man, those 6 other businesses right there, they're doing exactly what I want to do. They're going on these types of podcasts. Oh, they're writing that type of content. Oh, they're going and writing that book. Oh, they're going to go and do that type of branding. Frankly, that's all input to a decision on what you're going to focus on strategically, but it should never be the decider. And so for our own business, I was really struggling with what do we go do next? And most importantly, what are we not going to go do next? Because there's a lot of temptation to go do everything that you see and to go do exactly what everyone else is doing. But it's not going to get you to the altitude that you're looking for. It's going to make you very, very average. And average isn't why you probably started your own business. You started your business to crush it. And so finding and really going slow to go fast. I don't get credit for coming up with that phrase. Like way smarter people than me came up with that phrase and that mantra. But like measuring twice to cut once strategically comes down to truly knowing who are you targeting, how are you serving them, how do you connect with them and educate them, how do you build your marketing processes and your business to serve them well, and all that stuff. Because I definitely spent time going and building content for stuff that wasn't that relevant. It was kind of vanilla. And building processes and getting into networking events and going to meetups that I thought were the right move to go build relationships with people, both on the investor side as well as the partnership side. And no, it was kind of just made me feel busy. And there's a huge difference between being productive and being busy. Being productive means you're driving output.
Okay, just got a quick question on the time management thing. I struggle with the same thing, waking up early in the morning. I've tried it 1,000,001 times. We're waking up at 5 a.m. and I've done it for a while and it's worked. What time do you go to bed to be able to wake up at 4 a.m.? How do you make sure that you're actually in bed? Like, what is your secret for going to bed early enough to be able to wake up that early?
Oh, man. It's never easy, dude. I got to say, it is an alarm at night was something that worked. So I've eased some of this now that I'm full-time growing Madison Investing. But when I was working a day job and doing this, I would set an alarm. I found that best practice on some kind of list that was out there, but I would set an alarm to go to bed. And I think that this is going to be different for single folks versus folks that have a significant other, but you got to get that aligned, right? Like if you're with someone, it's a non-starter if you're not aligned there. So I would just say get aligned. That doesn't mean they have to listen to or subscribe to your approach. And I don't want this to turn into like a counseling therapy session by any means. It's like you do you. But if you're trying to wake up early, you can't cut into your sleep, by the way. I think this has been debunked enough, but just in case some people out there need to hear it regardless, I do not subscribe whatsoever to the hustle narrative that says you're supposed to kind of forego your sleep. So I think you should sleep. I think science says we should sleep. So I listen to science. So try to get, realistically, I get like 7 hours a night these days, but I used to be going to sleep at like 9:30. And these days I definitely don't do that anymore. It's so hard to go to bed. I mean, we're going TMI here, but like your kids don't want to go to bed until like we're basically 9. So how much free time does that leave for you? Well, it doesn't leave any. So that is also just probably going to scare people away from ever having kids, but I'll just say that's the reality. So, going to bed early, early to bed, early to rise.
I love what you said about getting aligned with your spouse. I have learned that myself when I was single and building this business. It was very different. And I could use my time however I saw fit. And I cannot do that. I have to be able to communicate with my spouse, and we do have to be aligned there, which can definitely be challenging when you have children, as I have recently experienced as well. So, but let's circle back though. So I still want to talk about this a little bit more. You said that you were at a point where you couldn't even wake up in the morning, or you didn't want to wake up in the morning to go to your day job. So how did you course correct and start waking up at 4 a.m.? Like that seems extreme to me. So what did you realize, or what did you do to all of a sudden get that level of motivation to wake up that early?
Oh, man. Yeah, I appreciate you catching that one. There was a weekend in particular where Jennifer and I, Jennifer's my wife, she's a co-founder in our company. We had a strategic planning session. So Jennifer, for background on her, she's also come from a robust kind of like leadership track in the corporate world too. And so we have this common language of business, which I don't take for granted. We didn't use it together until about 4 years ago. And then we found out, we can work together too. But that has not, at the very beginning, that was the opposite of smooth sailing. I mean, trying to figure out who am I and how do I interact with this person that I love deeply, but as a business partner. And that could be a whole separate podcast, I'm sure, but just to kind of cut to the chase, we did basically a 2-day planning session, like strategic planning session. And, we even use some of the methods and techniques where you write out like an expected case, a best case, and a worst case. So you put down your long-term goals. And the purpose of this planning session was, when did we want to try to hit certain monthly income levels, monthly passive income levels? Because we ultimately want to be completely passive. Not right now, because that'd be really boring to just sit on a beach entirely. But I would say we wanted to have the option. We wanted to say we'd rather not have to work. So our big plan is, how much fully passive income can we get coming in every single month? So we put that down on paper. then we worked it through. Then we said like, well, where's the income going to come from? And whose job is going to source the capital for us to keep investing? And that day and that weekend, when we had those discussions, we went full cycle like twice, I think, with tears and reconciliation and yelling. And again, not going to go into a therapy session here, but the output of that was this incredible new level of alignment and closeness, frankly. And so like we're in such an incredible place right now, work and life wise. And I could never dream of such partnership prior. But like everything else that's worthwhile in this life, like you got to fight for it. And there was fighting. So that's kind of it, So waking up at 4 a.m. was much easier when we previously set a time horizon, looking at the numbers of 15 years to get fully passive in terms of income, where we had to get zero active income coming in, period. I was not, and Jennifer was not satisfied with that number. It's just too damn long. And we wanted to chop it in half. And so we looked at the numbers again. And the moment I realized, oh, this is actually achievable, we could actually do this, then I was like, wait a sec, you're telling me I can effectively, I'm a big nerd and I like a sci-fi. So I'm like, you're basically telling me it's the equivalent of the Neo take the red pill moment and like bust out of the Matrix, if the Matrix was the corporate world. I mean, it's not that dramatic and stupid, but I'll say that, yeah, I find that motivating as hell. So putting that on paper and saying, all I need to do is show up the following ways. And if I show up the following ways for X period of time, then I'll be able to get there. And frankly, there's a couple small techniques in the morning that really made it easier. Got to give credit to Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning. I don't use that fully, but there's a couple things that really made it work well for me, such as start your day doing something that you enjoy. That way it's not a slog, And what I enjoyed at the time was reading about personal development and finances and real estate. So I would start my day reading 30 minutes and meditating. And that was such a nicer way to wake up. I was really good about not looking at Facebook and not looking at LinkedIn and not looking at, social media, which is super duper hard. And I'm not good at right now, by the way, but that's got to be it is find that specific numbers driven why in your mind, if that's what you're going for, or an equivalent why, and then peg that to an actual plan that shows you why waking up today at that time will change your life if you just keep doing it over and over.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you guys gained a lot of clarity through this process, through that weekend process that you went through. And that clarity could be described as a why. So you found your why, so to speak. And I think that people toss around the why a lot, but really at the end of the day, it's just giving you clarity as to why you even want to keep doing something like this. So really at the end of the day, you're looking for that clarity piece. And I think that's what it's sounding like. And I have a very similar experience too. When I started my business, the CPA firm, I was waking up at 4 a.m., read Miracle Morning too. And I had just this burning passion, desire to help people figure out their tax position, but also to scale a big business. I was highly motivated by money and numbers. And that is what it was at the time. And 2019 for our business, it was a growth year. We grew about 30%. It was one of the toughest years that I have ever run a business. And it's just toughest year that I've ever experienced professionally or personally. And what I realized is I was no longer motivated by the money factor. And my why has changed. So, I had to kind of sit down and ask myself, do I want to keep doing this? And if so, why? I needed that clarity again. So anytime that you because when you were talking about it's tough to get out of bed in the morning, I was thinking about 2019. I was like, man, I was in that spot so many times in 2019. And at the end of the day, what I realized is I just didn't have the clarity that I needed to keep going, to keep running the business, to understand why I was even doing it. And once you think about that, and once you kind of go through that process of just trying to figure out, what do you want your life to look like? Where do you want it to be? And why do you want it to be like that? You can redefine why you're there and you get that motivation again to wake up at 4 a.m. Now, I'm not waking up at 4 a.m. because I have a 6-month-old, but I used to. I used to burn the midnight oil many, many times. So I understand what that's like.
Yeah, but congratulations on the growth. That's awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so as we have some exciting stuff that we discussed today, we got to ask, you've been through a lot of different stuff. You mentioned the stuff you've done with your wife in terms of getting on the same page. Who do you lean on, outside your wife? Who do you lean on for support when you need support? Do you use coaches, mentors? Who do you lean on it from that perspective?
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to have encountered, basically there's two camps. One camp is the corporate world, kind of very short list of people I consider mentors. And then you have the folks that are more in like the real estate realm, entrepreneurship realm. And the corporate world mentors, I still talk to very frequently. And by the way, guys, like I think a key thing about mentors, because I get asked the question a lot these days of like, how do you find a mentor? At no time have I ever gone up to someone and said like, hey, will you please be my mentor? Frankly, like I think learning as a posturing, like I think learning and mentorship can come from anyone regardless of age and seniority, right? Like I learn from people that are both younger than me as well as less experienced than me very often. And so, but there's like three people I think within the corporate world that I consider mentors, one of which I still text with like every single day. And we lift each other up. And, there's always a good joking rapport there, but there's some real serious talk and real serious accountability from time to time if we feel like the other person is actually slacking on one facet of life. And so on the real estate front and on the entrepreneurship front, yeah, I've actually hired or I've joined 4 separate coaching programs. And I even just signed up I've just basically invested in the most I've ever invested in a coaching program just last week. I haven't started the coaching program yet, but I'm super excited about that because I think that is something where people say, oh, it's not worth it. Like, why would you go spend, thousands of bucks on a coaching program? And it's like, well, how I think of it in the inverse, right? It's like, how do you expect to have like enormous success and wealth, for your family if you're not going to go invest and take your own development seriously? Because that is, like you are the most important producing element in your business, right? But the ideas generation, the actual relationships you build. You got to take care of your brain. You got to invest in your skills, your abilities, and your knowledge. And so, the last hat that I wore, by the way, in the corporate world was actually leading professional development and learning and development for the whole company. And so it's a passion point for me. I want to walk the walk for myself too. I can't go around preaching that other people should invest in coaching programs without using them myself. And so, 4th coaching program right now for real estate stuff. And then very much mentors that I connect with on a daily basis. And they make sure I don't slack.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out, that I think everybody who wants to be successful in business has to have someone where they're reaching up to get, not only that accountability that so many people need, because I know I can speak from experience right now. I've been trying to do work on some of my own projects on the side. It's been extremely, extremely difficult to wake up early. And I'm seriously considering getting a mentor, getting a coach, or getting someone just to call me every day at 5 a.m. Wake up, because it is extremely challenging. I think sometimes having a mentor, having a coach, or having somebody there to hold you accountable to those things is important. So that's one aspect of coaching that I've always seen to be really important. Someone who's actually going to do it, because I've tried to set up these things before with people and they said, yeah, I'll hold you accountable. They'll hold you accountable for a few days and then they'll let it go. Like, no, you have to hold me accountable, period. But anyway, I think that's one aspect of coaching that's really important, but also at the same time to help guide you to the next level, to help make sure if your coach or your mentor has been there and done that before, which I think you should, if anybody's going to use coaching, should be going with a coach who's been there and done that. You don't want to use a coach who hasn't, and there's plenty of those out there.
There really are.
You have to watch out. You know what I mean? So you want them to be someone who's been there and done that so they can help pull you through some of the things, help you maybe avoid some of the mistakes that they've made, and help you kind of shortcut your path from A to B faster. So I found that to be extremely fascinating that you kind of point out the same type of things. We ask everybody this question, and I know we're kind of going a little bit over time here. If there's any piece of technology or software in your business that you couldn't operate without?
Oof. I have to say, this is, I'll give you one kind of easy answer, but because it's just so fundamental, but I think I'll give you the other one after that. Google for work, like if at some point, I know that you guys believe in cloud and your business functions based on that, but the people that are not fully embracing, just pick a cloud product that works across the board. Google is something that I got exposure to, and I mean Google for work to be specific for everybody out there. Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Drive, all that stuff. I just happened to get exposure to Google's offering that does all those things from my startup career. And I got so I could use those tools in my sleep because I went through so many high pressure situations of having to use those and lead teams with them. But man, I don't know what I would do without those things. I mean, all I need now is a laptop and I can go to a coffee shop and run our entire business. That's literally all that I need. And so that is just fundamental at the core. Our surrounding that though, we also use Evernote in kind of some quirky ways. Like one of the hardest parts of being an entrepreneur, I feel like, is coming up with ideas and getting those ideas. Most of them are stupid that I come up with, but I would say every once in a while, there's a really good one. So writing them down in a place that's quick and easy and convenient that could be cataloged. We use Evernote for that kind of stuff. Beyond that, though, we also use like MailChimp, and we currently use IDR, Investor Deal Room, for communication and management with investors and keeping secure, appropriate note taking from discussions and all that stuff. So I just gave you 4, and I totally failed on answering that question correctly. But those are some of the tools that we use right now.
I think we love Google. I think, the one you pointed out right there, I think G Suite, I think they call it, something along those lines, is absolutely amazing. Cloud, you can share it between people. You can share it. You can easily share spreadsheets. I think if you're in the accounting world or you're in the real estate investing world, spreadsheets is a big thing. It's where you house, your profit and loss statements, your pro formas for the most part. And being able to easily share that, being able to easily create that is just phenomenal, especially Drive. They have Drive. You can share store your documents and access that from anywhere. I think you can't live without those things in today's day and age, especially right now, especially during the COVID crisis where people are now all of a sudden having to work from home. You're no longer going into the office anymore. So if you had everything like the old days, if you had everything stored on your computer, your desktop computer in the office, and you can't go to the office, well, you're SOL, right? Now, if you have everything stored in the cloud, you can easily access that from home, from wherever you are, as long as there's an internet connection. So that was a huge one that you had pointed out. If our listeners wanted to learn more about you or Madison Investing, how would they be able to do so?
Yeah, so a couple ways. We have a website, so MadisonInvesting.com. They can always feel free to reach out to me directly if they'd like to. I'm happy to talk. Spencer@MadisonInvesting.com. And also on LinkedIn, I'm actually really active on LinkedIn. And so if someone's feeling like they don't quite want to go to the website, but they want to see me rant and rave about, professional development or investing or finances and stuff, just find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. And don't just follow, actually send me a connection. I'm not going to bite. So I'm always confused why people do that. So on Madison Investing front, though, people, they can feel free to apply. And it's just an investing club where we basically are already putting our own capital into deals. And then we show the deals that we're investing in after we've vetted them, and people can join along for that.
Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on the show today. This has been a phenomenal podcast. I think there's a lot of great takeaways that everybody can get, from leadership to hiring, getting in sync with your spouse. Really a phenomenal episode. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show again today.
Yeah, it's been a blast. I really, really appreciate the invite, guys. And it's no better way to spend the COVID-19 crisis than getting to know some really awesome people.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes and share the show with other business owners who may be facing their own growth challenges. And if you own a professional services firm, consider joining our private community. The Staying Power Collective is a community where owners of accounting, law, and consulting firms discuss best practices for running and growing virtual businesses. You'll get access to our Slack group, and you'll have a Zoom meeting once a month with a small group of other firm owners. To apply for the group, head on over to www.stayingpowercollective.com and fill out the brief form. And if you have suggestions for future topics or guests, or if you have general questions or feedback, send us an email at contact@stayingpowercollective.com. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great rest of your week.